Hello and welcome to the second episode about New Zealand, and I'm going to continue with some of the themes and threads that were raised in the first episode, and in particular I want to begin talking about the possibility of the foreign takeover of New Zealand. And remember how I showed you how way back in 1883 Sir George Grey gave a speech in Parliament warning New Zealand about the difficulty we were having creating independence from the rest of the world, and by citing two or three major corporations working here, namely the Crown, which is a foreign organisation, and also we have the Bank of England, which controls the monetary supply of New Zealand still today. And also he mentioned the press was controlled by these people, and when they control the press they effectively control the way a nation thinks, and this situation still prevails today. And also I showed you how in November 2015 the United Nations, which is another threat to New Zealand, occupied part of our territory, and they brought their soldiers with them to conduct a military exercise for the purpose of overtaking the patriots of a country. And the patriots of New Zealand would be the children of the people who signed the Treaty of Waihi way back in 1840, and that would be the Maoris and the Europeans. And the third enemy that we have in New Zealand today is China, which is Communist China, and we can't buy anything in Communist China, but yet we allow them to come in and buy our dairy industry up, and we see this factory being built in Pokeno, for example. And in Waihi we see this place just out of Waihi, about 7 kilometres on the way to Coromandel, called the Waihi Academy, which we're told is an educational facility, but it's completely abandoned, and this could just as easily be a military academy with all the parade grounds and all the facilities and dormitories right there. And of course the Chinese have been carrying on a trade war with New Zealand by sending us their cheap goods which they produce from their cheap labour, and also they break all the environmental rules that we're trying to comply with, and so their cost of production are down because of basically them cheating against what we're doing and undermining our local industries. And more recently we've had the situation where they dumped steel in New Zealand at a very cheap price, which undermined the steel industry in New Zealand. And when the New Zealand government looked at taking some action against this, the Chinese government threatened trade reprisals. And so let's have a look at that story now.
There are calls for the government here to reassure exporters in the face of a potential trade war after apparent reprisal threats from China over sanctions on its steel. According to a report by Fairfax Media, China's applying pressure to sway regulators at the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment away from slapping anti-dumping duties on imported Chinese steel.
The government needs to show some leadership. They've got to make sure that they're the ones in control of the situation. There's some very serious issues here in terms of the New Zealand steel industry, but what we can't afford is that in addressing those issues we end up compromising our other export areas.
Federated Farmers says a potential trade dispute with China could badly hurt the agriculture industry.
China has showcased its military might on an unprecedented scale as part of commemorations marking 70 years since the defeat of Japan in World War II. And while 12,000 troops and their weapons paraded through Tiananmen Square, the country's President Xi Jinping insisted China was committed to peace. The BBC's Carrie Grace is in Beijing.
No other country does remembrance like this, bringing a city of 20 million to a halt, turning the sky blue by ordering factories to close. Over recent weeks, China may have had trouble controlling its stock market and its currency. But when it comes to marshalling the nation for a choreographed spectacular, it has few rivals. The purpose, it says, is to cherish peace. It's all the doing of this man, President Xi Jinping, determined to demonstrate that he is the commander-in-chief and in control of events. Greeting the troops. He wants a disciplined, modern force to change the balance of power in East Asia. It was a display of Chinese military ambition that many countries didn't want to be seen to endorse. Leaders from wartime allies like the United States and Britain stayed away. President Putin was guest of honor, Russia ever closer to China since its relations with the West soured. And President Xi had a message for the world.
We Chinese love peace. No matter how much stronger it may become, China will never seek hegemony or expansion.
Some Beijingers wanted a glimpse of their new Air Force and defied instructions to stay away. But this was never a people's parade, nor was it an attempt at reconciliation between former enemies. The doves came last, the only symbol of peace